Hello, everyone. Give people a few more minutes to join, and then we'll get started.
To są restauracje, hotele i tak dalej, które wykładają codziennie ale co, ja mam 12 roku i dziennie mówić, które wpłacają i robią jej przelew, dlatego, że ci ludzie szukają możliwości pomocy.
Więc my powinniśmy tak sobie spoglądam na webinarze, wziąć od tych ludzi, powiedzieć, dajcie nam tysiaka, a my wam damy szansę na wyrobienie.
All right. I think we'll get started. Thank you all very much for joining this webinar. I'm very excited to try this. I have not ever really done a webinar like this before. So it is also an awesome learning opportunity for me that I look forward to reflecting on. A few practical things just on technology stuff before we get started. I would ask you all to generally have your microphones muted and make sure that you open the chat window. Please see if you can find that it is in the Zoom system, and that's a good place where you can all write questions and I can see them immediately and respond here, and that way we avoid the whole microphone muting, unmuting, back and forth. So make sure that you have the chat window open, and also ideally have a pen and a notebook ready so that you can do some reflection on your own. So as people are joining, I'll just take charge and mute people as they join in. Hopefully you can hear me. I've tried sharing my screen. I hope you can see, even if it looks a little bit weird to have Keynote open like this. So the first thing I would like you to do before we even jump into all of this is just take your notebook and a pen and just ponder for 60 seconds this question. Why am I here? Why did you show up to this webinar? Please write it down in your notebook, and I'll let you know when time is up. Why are you here? Why did you come to this? All right. This was 60 seconds. So what I would love for you to do now is type into the chat your answers to this question. Why are you here on this webinar? And then we'll get a sense of the expectations and intentions that are in the room. So please go ahead and type it in to the chat window. Why are you here? Bengt writes, I'm curious about the clarity cards. Excellent. Learn to use what I hope will be a helpful tool for me. See if we can get a few more. Simon, I want to get more creative tools and methods in my own toolbox. I want to learn how to use the clarity cards effectively because I think they will help me and others I work with. Interested in something that encourages reflection. Lots of frustration and uncertainty on my goals, tasks, and priorities. I believe I could improve my clarity. Excellent. So I will share briefly with you my intention also for this webinar. And Stuart also writes, I was interested in how a format used for play could help clear the cognitive noise. My intention is to introduce everyone in this webinar to the process of reflection. The process of reflection, I'll of course explain more. But in addition to that, I'll show how the clarity cards that I made can be used as a helpful artifact in facilitating reflection, both on your own and with a group. So I think that actually meets most of your whys, and I'll go ahead and just give you a sense of the agenda for the next roughly half hour that we have together. So what we just did is a check-in, a way for us to all kind of come together and know why are we here. So often forgotten when we have meetings. We have back-to-back meetings and we go from one thing to the next. And I at least often feel that it's like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? So that was the purpose of the check-in. The next thing I'll go through is the context for reflection. Where does it fit in our work life? And then I'll talk about the well of knowledge. And lastly, we'll go through the reflection process together. And after that, we have time for some Q&A if you have any questions about the process or what we just did, and about the cards, etc. So I'll stick around for that in the end. So that's what we'll do. Now, the context of all of this is that there are several different ways we can come together as humans to connect and create and collaborate. And sometimes in the world of facilitation, we call this the 4 meeting rooms. And you're probably familiar with all of them. They're called update, development, planning, and reflection. What often happens, at least in my work, is that we get together for a meeting and it's not really clear what kind of meeting it is. So one person is trying to like go through the agenda and like everybody has 2 minutes to give an update. And then one of the meeting items or the agenda items is the new something. And everybody wants to chime in, and like the creative people get all excited and like, oh, we should do this, and oh, we should do that, and oh, we could also do it on the moon. And suddenly it shifts into development. And then all the planning people, they're like, oh no, you know, how are we going to do all these things? And they were like, well, we need deadlines and we need a time frame. And the point of all this is that the challenge is not that one room is the right room, but that it rarely works if we try to do all of the rooms at the same time. So having an awareness, what room are we in? Are we just giving updates? Are we developing something new where we need to explore and be creative? Are we trying to narrow down? Are we trying to make a plan? And reflection is the room that I find is most often in all of this actually forgotten and left out, because I think sometimes it just feels that it is unproductive. Like you're not creating something, you're not making a plan, it's not fast and efficient, or at least it doesn't feel that way compared to an update meeting. So I find that in many of the organizations that I work with, the reflection is forgotten or not done. I'll just mute you. So that's where it fits in the whole process. I'm curious, does anybody have any questions? Does this make sense with these 4 meeting rooms? If you have any questions, please just type them in the chat and I'll see if I can address them before we move on. Relative to these other rooms, reflection is really the room where we step away from the work we're doing and think about it from you could almost say like a meta perspective. How are we working together? What can we learn from it? And how can we improve the way that we work? So if there are no questions, I don't see any questions in the chat. I'll jump in and explain a little bit more about the process of reflection. I think a good way of looking at reflection is using this metaphor, this image of the well of knowledge. It is something we definitely use a lot at Hyper Island, where I've been working for the past 1.5 years, but it also makes sense in most of the other reflection sessions I've done in my life. And so the way you can think of the well of knowledge is that when we've had an experience, it could be a learning experience by taking a course, but it could also just be a meeting or the last week of work or a specific project. Then going through that experience, we've taken in lots and lots of inputs, lots and lots of impressions. And we need to process that in some way. And that's what we do in the reflection room. But these experiences are not all the same. They operate on different levels. And the 4 levels that are here in the well of knowledge, if you imagine this well being filled with all these impressions, are repeat, refer, review, and reflect. So on the top level, we are generally just looking from on the most shallow level of, if you think of it as almost like a videotape that records all the impressions that you take in, we're just repeating it back as it is. We're replaying the tape in our mind. And I think it's often actually underestimated, the value of that. Like we think of it as like the brute learning in when we're in school, where it's like you have to learn your multiplication tables and your ABC and repeat after me. But it is helpful actually in the process of reflection, of starting in the top and then step by step working our way down into the different levels. On the level of referring, we begin to put our impressions in relation to other things. We put it in context. On the review level, we begin to add our own judgment. What do I think about this? Does it make sense to me? What have I learned? And when we get to the bottom on reflecting, it's when we really begin to say, well, what does this truly mean for me? How am I different? How does this work? What will I do differently in my life? So that it's not just someone else. It's like, what does it mean for me? So I don't think we need to be more theoretical than this. I mean, obviously the mind is not layered in 4 perfectly delineated layers, but it's a helpful way to think of it. So think of yourself as standing on the edge, looking into the water, and what I would ask you to do is just come along and guide it through these next questions that I will ask you. You'll get to experience the process of swimming down layer by layer into the well of knowledge. So please take your pen and notebook, and I'll just guide us through question by question. What I would like you to do as we do this is just have your pen, notebook ready. I'll give you one question at a time. You'll have about 3 minutes per question. And just as the first thing, write out the question exactly as it is, and then begin writing answers. And use all the available time that is there. Even if you feel like you've answered the question perfectly, just keep writing. Keep writing until I give you the next question. Even if nonsense comes out, just keep writing nonsense for a little bit. And maybe something interesting will come after that. So let's begin. First, I would like you to think just on last week in your work and in your life. And ask yourself this question: what happened? I'll give you roughly 3 minutes. You just write as many details as you can. What happened in your life last week? Again, this is not rocket science. Just take the facts of things that happened in your life last week, as much detail as you can. Doesn't need to be serious or important. Just write it all out, see what comes out. Keep writing for another minute and a half. See where it takes you. All right, you can begin wrapping up your last sentence. Now, of course, this is not a perfectly detailed description of everything that happened in your life last week. But you will probably have written out the things that have affected you the most, the things that stick out for you. So use that as a guide as we go forward. The next question I would like you to write down and answer are these two. What made me feel frustrated last week? And what am I excited about? So another 3 minutes, just write as much as you can answering these two questions. What made me feel frustrated? And what am I excited about? So now you've written out the observable facts at first. Now you're beginning to integrate your feelings, both the frustration and the excitement. Now for the next question, ask yourself this: what is truly important to me? What is truly important to me? Write as many answers as you can for the next 2.5 minutes. Keep writing. See whatever comes out. Just observe. Let your hand do the work. For the last question in this reflection session, what is the next step? Again, keep writing. You may write out as many possible next steps as you can come up with, and then decide in the end which one is the right one. But give yourself 2 minutes now to just write based on what you just went through. Last week, what happened? Frustrations and excitement. Your insights. What is the next step? All right, begin wrapping up. Thank you very much for jumping into the well of knowledge, swimming through the different layers, exploring your own experiences with me. I always enjoy doing this with myself. I always enjoy doing it with a group of people like you. I want to say a few things about how I use this in my life, and then we can talk a little bit about the cards and end up with Q&A. So one way I use these questions and this process of reflection for myself is similar to what you just did, but without anyone facilitating it. So just sitting on my own with my notebook and pen and going through a series of questions. Sometimes I just make up the questions that I think are the right questions to ask. And sometimes I use the cards for inspiration. So that's one way you can use the cards to push yourself to explore random questions. Now, the other thing you can do, and that I really enjoy doing, is facilitating a group of people through the different questions, like I've done with you guys today. And you can all do that with your coworkers, with your family. Just taking the time. It's good. It works really well to take 4 questions, 5 questions in a total of, you can do it in as little as 8 minutes and just process and reflect individually, step by step, and then take it around where everybody just shares one thing that they discovered in the process. And I would actually like for us to do that now. I would like if you would just pick one thing that happened to you, maybe something you wrote down or something you felt or something you thought about in this process, and just type it into the group chat, because then we can probably see how many different experiences came out of just going through these questions. So please just take a minute or two and type into the group chat window something that you would like to share with the whole group. It is both interesting in a context like this, where we're all reflecting on different last weeks, but if you do it with a team of coworkers, you will also see different perspectives on a week that you actually shared. But please type something in. Let's see what people have found in this process. Peaceful downtime to think is important to me. Most important next step, planning. How to stay focused on clients' design work in the middle of a divorce. Planning a wonderful Easter. Finished a big group project on consumer behavior in grad school. At first, I didn't think I was frustrated by anything, but I realized I'd been frustrated by lack of sleep and hadn't done anything about it. Spend more time with family, ? Very good. I'll see if any more chimes in. Here's one more. I had a pretty satisfying week overall, but what came out for me was that I need to cut down on some projects that my collaborators aren't responding actively enough on, and make some hard calls. I think these are all beautiful and individual reflections that came out. And I think this last one really, for me, also summarizes what I often find doing this, that there are things that I haven't noticed properly and that I'm not acting on. But by forcing myself to go through this process, I usually realize things like, oh, I need to make this change. So another one here, my actions and insights are not really in sync. it's another good insight, and then you can figure out what you want to do about that. Now, I just want to share a little bit about the cards so that you can get a sense of the cards and how they're made. So they look like this. I'll see if I can hold them here and show. And as you might have seen in photos, you know, they have the different categories on the back: facts, feelings, insights, actions. And these roughly correspond to those same levels in the well of knowledge. So the point is that you can look at them like this and pick out at least one of each. You can even do two of each category. Let's pick one here and one feeling card. And then you can get yourself to explore by turning them one at a time. The way I really like to use them is just, even if I start with a question of my own, if I get stuck in the process of writing, I can always pull out a card and it can help me get unstuck. And then I really like it when I am facilitating a group that I can either look through the questions and pick out, oh, I think these, like that's what I did for this morning. I had decided in advance, these were the questions that I wanted to take you guys through. And other times, if I'm doing it repeatedly with the same group, I really like the randomness of picking cards off of the deck here. So this is all I had in terms of showing you and introducing you to the process of reflection. I also want to be conscious of time. I promised this would end around 10:40. So the last thing, I will just take questions and answers. If anybody has some questions they want to ask about the cards or about the process or how to use it, and then we can go from there. You're welcome to either unmute and ask or just type it directly into the chat, whatever works best for you. Some examples of action cards. That's a good question. I'll find some action cards and show. Susan Kish asks, can you scale this for many, many people? I have a good answer to that as well. A few examples of action cards. What is the next step? What do I want to make? So a little bit more like project. What is it that I want to make? Where do I want to focus my efforts? Make a list of decisions to be made. My next 5 steps, so just thinking a little bit further ahead. What am I going to do? Just some examples of action questions. In terms of scaling this up to many, many people, what I often do is I will have, let's say, a group of 40 people or more. I will guide them through the same 4 questions. Then I will split them into groups of 3 and have them share in that triad. Make it very explicit that it's not a discussion, not a way of like debating back and forth. Everybody has their own experience, and that is valuable. So they just take turns in groups of 3 and share. If it's 40 people, I will probably, 40 people or less, I will still do a round where everyone gets to share, but I will ask them to pick one thing that they want to share and keep it relatively short, because they've had time. Typically, like I'll give them 12 minutes in the triad. So they've had roughly 4 minutes per person to already talk through their thoughts and their reflections with someone else. But if it's more, if it's like 100 people, if it's 200 people, I will do again, go through all the questions, have them share in triads, and then simply take a microphone around the room and probably hear 10 or 15 people share something that came up for them. So it looks a little bit different depending on how many people you have, but it's still the same process. Kathleen asks, how often do you use this practice? I use it at least weekly, I would say. Whenever really I have something where I feel that I am almost like energy-wise, like I'm vibrating but not moving in any clear direction, then it's typically because there's some decision that I haven't made, some experience that I haven't processed, and I'll do something like this. Sometimes it is 3 minutes, typing it on my phone while I'm on the subway on my way home after a stressful day at work, and I know that when I come home there are kids and wife, and I need to be do my best to process that experience and be ready to be a good father. So that's what it looks like sometimes. It's not always perfect circumstances, but other times I'll take a half hour and go to a coffee shop with my notebook and turn off my phone and sit and do many more questions or give myself a lot more time per question. How can we use this for distributed teams, maybe in 2 or 3 separate geographical locations? For distributed teams, I would do a local reflection in each team. If you ideally have somebody that can facilitate in each location, similar to what we did here, again, sit everybody in a circle where everybody can see each other, no tables in between you, write in notebooks, process, share in that room, and then you could come together in an online format similar to this. But then people have already done all of the pre-work, and you just basically have a round of sharing where everybody shares perhaps 1 or 2 things. I find it most interesting to share on the insight and action level together, to share what have I learned, but also what is the action that comes out of that? What is it that I'm going to do about it? And I think it's very often helpful for people to see both how broad but still personal learning is translated into a specific action. So that's how I would do it for distributed teams. Then April asks, do you go back to your reflections on a weekly or monthly basis? What is the best way to organize them? I don't go back that much. What I do is I write an annual report every year with my experience of the year. You can see it. I'll just put in a link in the chat. But that's actually the main time where I will go back and read through some of these. But I think the main thing for me is also, so long as I get to some kind of action in the end, I feel resolved, and I don't actually need to go back to the actual reflection stuff. The way I organize it is pretty simple. Like I write it in a notebook that looks like this. So I can show you an example here. Here I did a little drawing of Master Yoda because I wanted his perspective on something. But the questions are up here, and it's just what's happening, what's frustrating. And here's one that I made up. This one is not in the cards, but it says, what would Yoda do or say? So that looks like this. I doubt that I'm going to spend much time rereading this. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Oh, does the deck have blank cards? It does not have blank cards. I felt that it was best to just make a deck with the questions that I like. And then if you want to add more, I mean, make some more cards. These are completely standard format, so you can take regular playing cards and just write with a Sharpie if you want to, and add them in, and they should fit in size. But thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. I would very much appreciate thoughts on this experience. You can send me an email afterwards. I would love to do another one. I'll send out a follow-up email to everyone. But thanks again for coming. And yes, I've recorded all of this, so I'll see if I can share that recording as well. All right. Have an excellent day or evening or night, wherever you are in the world. Bye.